As we continue our series of interviews into 4ZZZ celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, we welcome Jordan Royale to Noise11.com. And, you know, we talked to Heather, we've talked to Jack, we've covered the history, we've covered the culture, and let's find out about how the music is put together from the one person who gets out there and discovers new music and then brings it to the station and puts it on the air. Welcome to Noise 11, Jordan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Well, you've got your show every week. It's on every Wednesday, and it's always interesting new music. It's educational in that when I have a look at a playlist that you put together of what you are going to be playing over the course of a couple of hours on a Wednesday each week on 4ZZZ, there's not a lot of familiarity in there. You're discovering artists before I'm discovering artists, which is a good thing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love like listening to new music and getting down different rabbit holes, and obviously having 2 or so hours each week forces you in a sense, in a great sense, to go out and find new music because you don't want to continuously be playing the same stuff. 4ZZZ also has like amazing quotas. I think it's really important that the station has quotas to reflect the community. So we have a local quota, Australian, new music, and like gender diverse female as well, and Indigenous. And I think that's really important because it makes sure that you are considering all different types of music and everyone sort of in the community as well. But I love going to local gigs. 4ZZZ is like very connected with the local scene and very much supports local music. So it's amazing being able to like play local music especially and then go out and see them and then look at the openers that they've like supported too and then bring their music into 4ZZZ and then share it with the community on air. I think it's so special. But I also like going on different rabbit holes Australia wide, like nationwide. So it's sort of like I feel like I do it in a weird way, but I look at what bands, maybe from like Sydney or something, if they're traveling to Melbourne, who they have on the lineup and who they have on the gig poster, and then I go and like find their music and then go on all different sorts of rabbit holes. So it's just a lot of fun to be able to bring that to like a radio audience and be able to share like what new thing I've discovered that week. So it's a lot of fun.
And I should mention the name of the show, Sonic Alien, 1 to 3 p.m. every Wednesday. And of course, you don't just have to be in Brisbane. You can just, hey, Google it or hey,
Yeah,
Siri it,
yeah.
and up it comes.
Yeah, exactly. Don't have to be in the car anymore to listen to the radio. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. With the style of your lifestyle, I guess, getting out and seeing these bands, once upon a time, there was a thing called A&R in record industries, record companies, Warner, Universal, Sony, don't have A&R anymore. It's now a show like yours is basically the A&R of the music industry in the 21st century because you're the one that is bringing the new music to the surface.
I think the Australian music industry, um, I think there needs to be some more work done because I think a lot like community radio stations are really the ones that are supporting, uplifting, and amplifying the voice of like local artists and Australian artists. I've heard like a bunch of people talk about it all across that particularly Australian artists think that like success is making it overseas because overseas tends to like I don't know, pick up Australian artists like Amyl and the Sniffers, Party Dozen as well. Um, that don't usually get supported on Australian mainstream or Australian like bigger music related platforms. I think that a lot of the work, like as you said, is done in community radio spaces that really like have, I mean, 4ZZZ really instilled that in me, and I think it's such a great value to have of supporting your community and uplifting your community and being just very love and passion filled towards the arts that are happening around you and like yeah, just endlessly supporting them and uplifting them and amplifying their voice. I think that's really important. So that's what I really admire about a lot of community radio stations, but particularly 4ZZZ.
You've really got a foot on both sides of the fence because apart from being at 4 Triple Z, you also happen to be hovering around the corridors of Triple M in Brisbane, B105 up there,
Yeah.
where you would see a massive cultural difference between community radio and commercial radio. What do you see as the downside of commercial radio in what they're doing with Australian music at the moment?
I think that they don't have as many quotas that they have to fill, which just means that they don't have to, look for new Australian music or up and coming Australian music, even local music. I think they also just have very different demographics that they cater to. I think that people that listen to B105 or Triple M wouldn't really, they would want to hear like the hits or something happening overseas rather than something more Australian based and local based. So I think that that could maybe even talk to like the values of maybe just people walking around the streets. I think like if even if you look over at Europe, they have a very big like love and connection with like local arts. Maybe we don't have that as much in Australia. But yeah, I think that there's definitely should be a shift in more commercial radio stations to support Australian music. Yeah, I think that it's like really, I think it's really important. And I think there's just so much amazing Australian music that because of those, I guess, systems like flies under the radar, doesn't get listened to as much, and you really have to go looking for it or look to community radio stations. I think that it should be more accessible, I guess, and more put in front of people because it's just amazing.
When you look at the major radio networks in Australia, they're multi-million dollar companies. But when you look at the three majors, Warner, Universal, Sony, multi-million dollar international companies beholden to international shareholders. And when you look at an organization such as ARIA, it's beholden to those three majors, but it's also a multi-million dollar revenue earning company. ARIA seems to have its own set of problems. It can't do what you're advising it should be doing for the Australian music industry because it's beholden to three international majors who are only concerned with corporate wealth going back to New York. It's almost like we're at a point with the Australian music industry where it needs to be dismantled and we start again.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's like any industry, I guess, where you get to like a certain level and there's a certain amount of money involved, and then you sort of lose touch with, I guess, what it was originally meant for, what it was originally meant to do, who it was originally meant to support and uplift. And I think like, yeah, it gets into a bit of a negative feedback loop and it sort of just not loses touch, but like loses sight. And yeah, I think the Australian music industry maybe needs a little bit of reshuffling, as you said, as to its priorities and where it supports people and what it supports. I know that, I mean, I am really, really heavily into like heavier music. So like maybe like emo, well, that's not really a good example, but like shoegaze, grungier, like heavier type of music. And I think that even like in genre based, the Australian music industry seems to support a lot of like poppier artists. So I think like even in what music genre it supports, like sometimes it has lost a bit of diversity too. And even in like representation too, it's like a whole rabbit hole that I could go down. I think like there needs to be greater representation in female artists, First Nation artists, gender diverse artists as well. Like I think that yeah, there's a lot of different avenues and streams that could better support people, which I think is why it's really important that Triple Z and a lot of community radio stations have quotas that we fill to make sure that those gaps and there is representation across like on air. So yeah.
Let's focus on ARIA for a moment to announce last week that they were changing the formula for the chart, which I thought was complete rubbish when I read through what they were doing to try and put a band-aid over the gash that they've created in the Australian music industry. The ARIA chart itself, when we look at this week's singles chart, no Australians in the top 50. Last week, no Australians in the top 50. The week before that, no Australians in the top 50. And what they're doing with their formula is not going to change that. Is ARIA an organisation from an independent perspective that has any value today?
I'm not like probably the best person to be across all of that. I know a lot about that. Um, But from like my role and like announcer in a community radio station, I don't really look too much at the ARIA charts or like look at really what is going on with ARIA at all. I think it's quite important for artists, but again, like as you said, it's sort of lost its way. And I think, yeah, as you said, like their solution was a bit of a band-aid sort of solution. I think that there are like a lot of mishaps going on with the Australian music industry at the moment. I think that there are a lot of band-aid fixes that are going on because I think people are recognizing like, hey, you're supposed to be supporting and uplifting Australian artists, but if you look at what you're posting about and what you're talking about and what you're actually playing or representing, there's like a huge gap in what you're supposed to be doing. And I think it's quite upsetting that like Australian artists particularly would probably see that as a really amazing like be all end all opportunity and it's just not catering to them. I think yeah, there definitely needs to be a lot of work done. But me as a community radio presenter, I don't really look too much towards ARIA. I sort of just try and find my own music and support the local scene to play. I guess that could be like they're just not really supporting Australian artists, so I don't really look towards what's going on. But yeah.
Well, let's talk about radio for a sec, commercial radio. When I was at Austereo in the 90s, one of the program directors actually said to everyone, we are the radio industry. We're not the music industry. We're here to sell advertising, not albums. In a lot of ways, that actually makes sense. The radio industry and the music industry are two different industries, both beholden to shareholders, and he does have a point. Therefore, should commercial radio be the solution to ARIA's problem, which they say it is, that commercial radio should be playing more Australian music? Or is this something that is the point of difference that creates the advantage for 4ZZZ to further enhance itself with the community?
I think that there's definitely a point of difference in that. I mean, when you listen to 4ZZZ versus when you're listening to a a commercial radio station, you would expect to hear very different things on air. I think that 4ZZZ, obviously, the announcers that are on air and are a part of the station love the station in particular. Like, it is such a passionate, love-filled space. There is so much knowledge of like the Mandarin local scene, the Australian scene over so many decades. And I think that passion and just love for the station comes through on air. Like all announcers basically are not paid for their time to come to the station. So that is just pure like love and connection to the local space that you hear on air. So I think listening to that station is like you want to discover new music, you want to be a part of the local scene, you want to hear local artists, Australian artists that maybe aren't getting played anywhere else. And, I think having that connection with an announcer is really special as well. Someone that's in your scene, that's amplifying local bands and is just so passionate to be in that space. I think that's really beautiful. So I think that is a point of difference of, what you expect to hear on air. I think that's really interesting what you said about the director at like the commercial radio station saying that the music industry and radio are separate. I feel like that's probably true like on a commercial level, definitely not really on a local level. Like even the or community radio station level, like I think that Triple Z and community radio stations have bring artists into the station all the time and amplify their voice, interview them on air, and like have so much connection with the music scene and music industry, I guess you could say then. So yeah, I'm not sure if I really answered your question, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the ARIA Awards being sponsored by Spotify tells it all. If a
Mm.
company like Spotify is getting behind the ARIA Awards, and they're the ones creating the playlists with no Australian content that are creating a top 50 in the ARIA chart each week with no Australian artists. I rest my case, Your Honour.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Sonic Alien and, in particular, the show that you did last week, because I find it interesting that you had the Empty Threats, who are an Adelaide band, and
Mhm.
tomorrow's forecast a Brisbane band. Is it always
Mhm.
about having one local and one from somewhere else in the country for you?
I try to mix it up a lot. I love the Empty Threats. They are so near and dear to my heart. Like when I first started coming into the station, I was in high school And I obviously knew of like a lot of bigger Australian artists, like more mainstream from my parents that were like, back in like the 90s. But didn't really know of any more like grassroots Australian, like younger bands from across the country. And they were the first band that was introduced to me through 4 Triple Z, through being played on air. So like they will have such a special place in my heart forever. So it was so amazing to be able to chat with them and sort of pick their brain about their music. And tomorrow's forecast are near and dear friends of mine through I met them through coming into the station, and they were on my show about a year ago as well. And ever since then, I've like been friends with them and have gone to all of their shows. And I think that's another testament to community radio stations and 4 Triple Z is like I have made so many amazing, beautiful friends through that station. But yeah, in terms of programming and interviews, I try to have, I try really hard to support local artists because that's the most rewarding and special thing to me and to the scene and to them as well. I think it's so special to be able to chat with local bands and then see them play and see them around. And yeah, I will always try to make sure that they have a spot in the space. And then whatever's happening in Australia or overseas as well, like if the Empty Threats were coming over for a show, so that's why they came on the show. And then if like a band is releasing an album or whatever's going on, I try to make sure that it's quite relevant to what's happening.
Let's talk about the big events that are coming up for Brisbane from 4 Triple Z. And in fact, Z50, which I'm pretty excited about.
I'm so
Saints
excited.
and Regurgitator must be gods in Brisbane.
They're such gods. Oh my goodness. I wasn't told about that lineup and I went in to like record an advertisement spot for it. So I went into the studio and they're like, "Oh, just like read through the sheet of paper and like, say it." And I was like, "Hold on. Hold on. Is this the lineup for the Z50?" I was like, and I was like, "We have the Saints like this that's so crazy that yeah, as you said they're gods." And I think like the whole time that I was just reading that like advertisement spot, it was like no acting was required. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So yeah, I'm so excited for the Z50. It's going to be like such a historical, I think, moment for the station. Obviously, it's so awesome.
Yeah, it's a great lineup on there. Tropical Fuckstorm, Full Flower Moon Band, Big Nota, Briggs's
Yeah.
metal band, Butterfingers, Scream Feeder, Nice Biscuit, Party Dozen, Dancing Water, Frangipanis, and others. How many of those have you had on your show?
Um, I've had Platonic Sex on my show, which is another band that's going to be playing on the lineup. And I don't think I've had any other bands on the lineup on my show, but I really hope that I can get some, maybe Tropical Foxstorm on the show because they're so awesome and I really like their new music. So yeah, I'm so excited. It's going to be such an awesome time.
There's so many events happening between now and the end of the year. Are you involved directly with some of these live events?
Not directly. I'm going to be around town helping out on a lot of them, but there are also some individual shows that are like grouping together to put on events as well, which is awesome. So yeah, 4 Triple Z is really taking over Brisbane for the end of the year with gigs and shows. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been great to talk to you, Jordan. And the show, of course, is called Sonic Alien, 1 to 3 p.m. every Wednesday, streaming all over the world. You don't even have to be
Really
in Australia to
everywhere.
listen to this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time as well. It was really awesome having a chat with you. I really appreciate your time.
Good to have you here at Noise 11.
Yeah, thank you so much.